Welcome back to Catholics on Campus, my friends. Have you ever relocated to a new area or maybe faced finding a new church for some reason? A lot of times when you go from college to college, undergrad to grad school, going on to your first job, you may find yourself in a position where you need to shop around for a new church, and that might be freeing or frustrating for you. So, what do you look for in a new church or in the Mass? You might be looking first at location. What's easiest for you to get to? Do they offer Mass in the languages that you speak or you prefer to attend in? What are the Mass times? Are they times that work for your schedule or not? You might look for the type of Mass. Is it a contemporary Mass? Do they offer traditional Latin Mass? You might look at the pastoral style. Is it down to earth? Do you feel good when you leave? Or is it more direct and maybe a little more challenging that can help keep you focused on heaven? Do they have an adoration chapel or a perpetual adoration chapel? Those things might be important to you and you want to check off the list on those. It may be that you want someplace that's really family oriented and you want to maybe start your family, you're married, you want to go find a church that could help you in that way. You may even want to look at some place that is focused on building community. Perhaps it's not all about the pastor, but maybe you feel drawn to certain parish ministries. Like maybe they have a young adults ministry that's very appealing to you. They have Knights of Columbus, or maybe you're looking for St. Vincent de Paul chapter to get involved in. It could be that they're family oriented, they have really strong programs, or maybe even a really strong faith formation program. Maybe it's the vibe of the parishioners. Are you looking for a place that's welcoming, friendly? Or maybe you're looking for a place that's reverent or very involved, service focused. Bottom line is, you want a place that feels to you Christ centered. So, lots of things to consider. Today, you're going to meet someone who has been a newcomer to many parishes and has worked hard to get to know a variety of parishes in a new way. My guest today is Daniel Markham, who has written a fabulous book called 52 Masses, A Journey to Experience Catholicism Across America. And for those of you watching on YouTube, here's the book. All right. And for over 2 years, he traveled all around the US, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico to attend Masses at 52 parishes. At each parish he visited, Daniel wrote about someone or something taking place there, a ministry, an effort for evangelization, personal story about somebody, that kind of thing. He attended Mass at parishes of all sizes. They were at rural communities, urban communities, suburban settings, and a variety of places that weren't even parishes at all. His goal was to explore the many ways Catholics are living the faith in the United States. So, welcome to the podcast, Daniel. Let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's good to talk to you again. We met in Ohio back in the fall. So I'm a cradle Catholic and I'm married to a cradle Catholic, which pleased my mother immensely. My wife, she's a Catholic school principal and has been for 20 years. So our life is largely revolved around our parish as the kids were growing up. We have three now adult children. Our oldest is 30 and our youngest is 23. So we're empty nesters and have been for a while. And I'm a lifelong writer and editor. That's what I do for a living. I write for a trade magazine on metal distribution, which is a little different, but it's something I enjoy, and I do it from home. So it's allowed me a lot of freedom to pursue this, and really, actually, now pursue all sorts of different activities through the church and attend daily mass, and so it's a great vocation for me, a profession for me, because it's really allowed me to pursue this and other ways of growing my faith.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and as you mentioned, we met last year at a parish arts fair in Hilliard, Ohio. And I was really surprised to see that there were actually a number of authors there. I guess I'd never thought about authors being at arts fairs, but there were quite a few there. And I've been to some other fairs since, and now I'm starting to notice that there's authors at these fairs. But can you tell us how you got interested in writing? You mentioned it's been a lifelong
Yeah,
career, but what was
I
that?
think I knew from a very early age, probably fourth or fifth grade, I think I found that I really enjoyed it. And I knew for growing up, I wanted to be a sports writer, a big sports fan. And that was really what I was dead set on doing. I went to a college in Indiana. I grew up in New York, but I went to school in Indiana because they had a good journalism program and a bad baseball team, which was the combination I was looking for. But by the time I graduated college, I knew that even though I was studying to be a sports writer, and that was what I was going to do initially, I also knew by then that I really wanted to write more than just covering games. I wanted to write whether novels or plays or in this case this book. I knew that I wanted to do more than just writing sports.
Sure. And what sparked the idea for your book?
So it was in 2016. I just dropped off my youngest son off at high school soccer practice. He went to Catholic school in Northwest Indiana, and a different one than the older two had gone to. And I was reminded that this parish that my oldest son and I had attended on a couple of occasions, St. Anne of the Dunes. It's actually located in the Indiana Dunes National Park. And they have mass every third Sunday in Lithuanian. And my oldest son loves the world. And so in high school, he used to go to mass in foreign languages wherever he could. And I was just reminded of this small parish, and just suddenly the idea flooded over me. I should attend Mass in all 50 states and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. That's 52. There are 52 weeks in a year. I could do it in a year, and I could write about something at each parish I visited. And by the time I got home, 15 minutes later, the whole idea really for the book was in my head. And that was 2016. And I targeted 2021 to do it because that's when my youngest would be out of high school. So I didn't want to be doing it while he was on the road. It all just came to me. Initially, I thought it was my idea. And then years later, I realized that it wasn't my idea. It was just what I was being called to do. And that was an amazing realization when I just kind of figured out, oh, this is what God wants from me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were able to pick up that call and know when you were going to do it and be very practical about it.
Yeah, that weekend I shared it with a couple of deacons from our parish, and I said, "What do you think?" They were like, "Yeah, that sounds really neat." And everyone I talked to, I mean, even people who weren't Catholic, they were really engaged with it. They would say, "Oh, you could do this or this." I was like, "Yeah, I guess I can do this." And the logistics were going to be a challenge. Fortunately, living in the Midwest made it a little easier to get to a lot of places just on a Sunday or just on a weekend and come home. So that made it a little bit more doable, as well as working from home. I just basically shifted to working on the road. So I was able to continue to do my regular job as I pursued the books. Both
Sure.
those, without that, I don't think I'd have been able to pull it off
Mm,
without being
yeah.
independently wealthy, which I am not.
Well, I have to wonder, what is the most surprising thing that you discovered while you were attending Mass at so many different parishes?
The first thing was really neat because the very first weekend on the road, I attended Vigil Mass on Saturday and then two Masses on Sunday because I would go to multiple Masses on the weekend. If I was going to be there, I wanted to be there as much as possible, essentially. And
Mm,
it was really fascinating because it was three different priests, and they all gave different homilies on the gospel reading. And normally I hear the gospel reading in one homily a weekend, like most people. And so by hearing three, I realized each one of them gave a very different homily on the gospel reading. Each one of them was very much valid and faithful to Catholic teaching, but all in different, they all took different paths from it and built off of it. And it just highlighted just how rich and varied and how much richness there is in each these small gospel readings, that you could get so many different ways of approaching it and seeing it and hearing it, and with that word just coming from and emanating out in so many different directions. That was really kind of like, wow, I never thought of that so much before.
yeah.
And then I spent, especially at the first half of the trip, I was blessed to be able to get invited to stay with some priests in the rectories, and those were
Mm,
great because we would oftentimes stay up late just talking, and I had this really great opportunity to hear so many of their own stories about how they had been called and the different paths they took into the priesthood, which affects their priesthood and it affects how they go about their ministry and serving God. And so I saw all of these varied ways that these men have been called. And it really just, both of those things combined just really surprised me. I don't know, probably just because I never really thought of it, given it a whole lot of thought before, like so many of us. And just to hear those two things was truly eye-opening, ear-opening. uh,
yeah.
to hear the many ways that both the gospel can reach us, as well as the many ways that we can come into the church and the directions that we can be brought into the church.
Well, that sounds like a whole nother book to talk about some of those discussions you have with the priests about
Oh
their
yeah,
callings.
there's a lot of things like that along the way. You might have a whole nother book there. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, do you have a favorite story or parish experience that stands out from the book?
Okay, so my favorite parish was the Tri-County Parish in Cottonwood, Idaho. And there's no particular reason. I just love the people of Idaho. It was just, I didn't have any expectations, and they were just so warm and welcoming. And it was just an amazing Catholic community in a state that's not terribly Catholic, but the area, Idaho County, where they were, is just overwhelmingly Catholic. And I just loved the time I spent there. The favorite story was probably at St. Gianna's Maternity Home in North Dakota when I spent the weekend with Father Joseph, Brother Nick, their third order Franciscans, and the spiritual directors for the home. And I did morning and evening prayers with them. And then on Sunday, we went over to the home and talked to the people who were involved. And I had a conversation with a young lady named Kay, who was 17 and had a 2-year-old son. And so she was pregnant at 14. And she shared her story with me. It's about what you would expect under those circumstances. And then we were interrupted briefly by a young girl who was born at the home, was adopted there, was looking for Kay's son. And Kay kind of shoved her out the door and said, talk to this gentleman. And I figured it was a good place to stop. She had told me her story and she said, no, we got to keep talking. And I said, oh, okay, sure. I don't usually get that response, but sure. And she sat down and she just basically asked me, how do you stay married? How do you trust your spouse? How do you keep from getting bored? All these questions she had about the life that she wanted, but she never really had anybody in her life that could be a model for it. And as wonderful as all the people at the home are, I mean, just amazing examples of Christian love, they're all single. And so she didn't have that one thing that she was looking for. And she was going to take advantage of it because I was blessed with a great family. And so I answered her honestly, as honestly as I could. And then the following day, when I left, I was reflecting on it. And I couldn't help but think that when I was preparing for the trip, I had never expected that I would be uniquely positioned to help someone. Like of all the things I imagined myself doing, that was not one of them. And so I couldn't help but just think that no matter what happened the rest of the way, that validated everything. That justified the whole trip to be able to be there for this young woman who, who deserves an opportunity for the life that so many of us maybe take for granted. So
Yeah.
that would be my
Yeah.
favorite experience.
I love that. Yeah, it's those God moments where you're put in the right place at the right time are truly
Absolutely.
amazing.
So there were so many times, and somebody had told me before I left, they're like, "You'll think you're in charge, but you're not. The Holy Spirit will point you where you need to be." And that was the other thing that I thought of as I was leaving. I was like, "She was absolutely right. This is where I needed to be in this moment." And it just felt like everything else after that was gravy. That every
Yeah,
experience after that just was built on top of how amazing that was.
that's awesome. Thank you for that. How did writing this book deepen your own faith or maybe change your perspective about the church?
Oh, tremendously. One of the things that happened was I'd be sitting at mass and I'd be listening to the gospel reading, and I was amazed at how often it was just laser pointed at me. That the message was, wow, that's talking to me specifically, not talking to me generally, but to me specifically. And then it dawned on me that, wait, those are the same gospel readings that I'm hearing at home. But I was totally committed and focused. There were no the kind of distractions that we might separate us from the word at mass. And I realized that it's always there. Whenever you're there, is the more you are fully committed to mass and the Eucharist, the richer the experience is for you. And that was really an amazing thing. I think for me that really resonated, but also it was just the feelings that I couldn't really necessarily describe, I guess. One of the things that was really fascinating was when I was on the trip and not before or after, I could drive forever, basically, without getting tired or hungry or thirsty. And the Eucharist was sustaining me, whether it was the promise of it or the reception. It just allowed me to be full, to have like basically all of my needs satisfied. And I was able to just basically exist in just a very peaceful, uncorrupted state when I was going and coming and going. And it was the only thing. Like I said, I can't do it now. I get tired after a couple of hours driving. And but when I was doing this, it just nothing really bothered me as long as I didn't let it. As long as I allowed the peace, the satisfaction, the contentment that comes from receiving the Eucharist every Sunday to govern my whole outlook, my whole feeling, then nothing really, it'd only be corrupted if I allowed it to be. And
Right.
that's just something that I think that we can all, that it wouldn't just be to me. That's something that all of us can feel is as long as we, if we do take that from there and try not to let the little things corrupt that.
Yeah. Were there any particular virtues that you felt like you grew in during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it had a tremendous effect on me just personally. I feel like a different person now than when I left. If any one of them, that would probably, patience would be the virtue I think is easy to pinpoint. I don't let those things that aren't significant, that kind of get in the way of me and my relationship with Christ. I'm much more tolerant of those things and not letting them affect me and corrupt me again. It's just a
Yeah.
different, I feel that and that started very early on. It wasn't like, oh, I got done with it and now I feel this way. It was very much happened right from the outset. It changed me in a lot of ways.
Sure. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk
Okay.
about some advice you might have for students and aspiring writers. So, what advice would you give to students who feel called to write about their faith?
I think if there was one impediment to me, it would have been feeling I wasn't worthy. That why should an ordinary sinner like me be doing this? That was a question I had very early on. And that was one way where that feeling that this is what God was asking me to do was so comforting because I didn't have to worry about whether I was qualified. It wasn't my call to make. So I would say that I think that if you feel called to write about your faith, then you have been, and you should do it. And don't be afraid that you're not worthy of it because your experience, your approach may be the thing that touches someone else and leads them to God in a way that nothing else has so far. And I think that's what we should all be aspiring to in our space. And as long as you're writing within Catholic teaching, then I don't think there's anything that should stop anyone from pursuing it.
Yeah, yeah. I thinking about my own work as a podcaster and also with the coaching that I do
Yeah.
and other writings and things, I do feel that tug of, oh no, I hope this is all in alignment with the church and I don't want to mislead somebody or that kind of thing. It could be paralyzing sometimes, but you really need to ask the Holy Spirit for help and
Hmm.
you are going to get that. I found it to be really helpful. So when young writers are thinking about having the sense of authenticity, but also balancing that with accurately representing Catholicism, what advice would you give them?
I started Father Mike's catechism in a year. And at the start, he was mentioning that some people can talk about how the church's teachings, the rules can feel constricting. But he said the proper approach to think about it is that you are allowed to experience all this fullness within the boundaries of the church's teachings. So if you look at it that way, there's so much room to explore. There's so much room to find that authentic self within the boundaries of the church that you can be your authentic self within. And it's not necessarily limiting. It's, hey, this is here, but you've got all of this freedom inside it. And it really struck me when I heard that, and I felt that spoke to my experience.
Sure. I wonder if there are any practical steps that students would want to take if they want to publish a book someday.
Well, I was fortunate in that my publisher found me. I had sent a letter to, when I figured out where I was going to go for all of the parishes, I just basically sent emails to every parish in the country that had an email address. One of them went to a priest who passed it along to a friend of his who was a publisher. So that was how I got mine. So I can't really recommend that as the step. But what I would just advise is, with or without, don't wait for something to happen. Start writing, build an audience, and if you do those things, if you're able to connect with an audience, you're going to become far more attractive to a publisher and getting through the very crowded field. So that would be my advice is just make sure you write as much as you can and wherever you can and just basically try to build an audience that you can take to a publisher.
Awesome. Can you talk about how you actually go about building that audience?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of avenues. There's obviously sites that you can do your own writing on. And obviously there's other medium besides just the written word, which is what I grew up in and what I'm comfortable with. And probably one of the things, if I had a regret, was I told my wife, I was like, I should have done a podcast while I was on the road. to
Yeah.
help build that audience. Nowadays, I think that's really important, is to be open to reaching people. I mean, you can still be at your core a writer, because I think most of us probably in all of these spaces are. You need to be open to reaching people where they are, as the phrase goes. And that may be through a podcast, it may be on a blog, and it may be through using more than just the written word to get your message across. And I wouldn't say necessarily, I'm a little older than that, but that would seem to me to be the best path for building that audience. And in retrospect, I wish I had done some things differently before I left to do just that.
Yeah. Now that makes sense. Were there any pivotal moments in your journey that shaped your perspective about the church?
I don't think there was anything specific that I could point to. It was much more of a gradual thing with, I guess, maybe moments of inspiration, I suppose. But there were occasional times where there was a funny moment in Mississippi. I was supposed to be in Louisiana, and I was going on a Friday afternoon. Father called me and said, "Yeah, we're not having mass on Sunday." I thought, well, I didn't know that was an option. He said, "The hurricane's making landfall right about when we were getting out of mass." I was like, "Oh, I didn't know there was a hurricane." So I kind of said, all right, well, I'm all the way down in Louisiana. I don't want to waste the trip, so to speak. So I went up to the church in Mississippi I was going to go to later on, and just went to mass there. But I was on the hook for now 2 hotel rooms. So I was like, I'm really frustrated about that. I'm like, okay, I got to get the cheapest hotel room I could find. And I got the cheapest hotel room anyone could find. And so I spent as little time there as possible. It was really disgusting. And then the next morning, Father at Mass gives the gospel reading, and it's about how the Pharisees were mocking the disciples for eating with their hands, and Christ says, only that which is inside of us can make us unclean. And I think, well, you don't have to hit me over the head with that. I get the message. But it was really also like, whoa, this isn't necessarily supposed to be easy. Just because I'm doing this does not mean that I'm not going to encounter difficulties along the way. And I think to the saints and others who suffered indignities up to and including death, and I think, well, a skeezy hotel room in Mississippi is not the worst thing in the world. So there were a lot of things where, and I think if there was one thing that really changed, I didn't mention, was that ability to see the blessing in everything and use it to both move past it, but also grow closer to God in the process, to see
Yeah.
how He is putting these things in front of us and what to take from them, and how to see that as this opportunity rather than something that's just a hindrance.
Sure. Now you visited some Catholic churches that were actually on college campuses, is that
I
right?
did. Yeah, I specifically wrote about the Newman Center in Salt Lake City because I thought it would be interesting writing about Catholics. I mean, lots of places where Catholics aren't the majority, but oftentimes they're a plurality of a faith on a lot of campuses across the country. But in Utah, they're going to distinctly be the minority religion. So I was interested in getting their perspective, as well as writing about the Catholic on-campus experience and how one keeps and grows in his faith and or her faith in the campus setting. But I also went, yes, in New York, I went to the university parish as well, but I wrote a different kind of story than I did in Utah, whereas there I was writing specifically about the Newman Center and Catholic ministry on campus.
Sure. But I can relate to being in a state with very few Catholics. I lived in Alabama for a number of years,
That would be one of
and
them,
it's
yes.
less than 5%
Yeah,
Catholic.
yeah. Yeah,
So
probably
really,
other than Utah,
very
maybe the
different.
smallest in the country in terms of a population, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it was very different. And it really actually gave me an opportunity to go deeper into my faith because we were regularly having conversations with people that were not Catholic.
Yeah.
And to be able to defend the faith or at least say something inspiring that they might connect to as Christians,
Yeah.
because some of them didn't think of Catholics as Christians. So
Oh, yeah.
it was an interesting time.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in an area where everybody was Catholic. I mean, we had I went to public school, but we got bused to our CCD class, and there would be like 2 Jewish kids and a Protestant kid left behind. And we would just go and have CCD and then come back. It was, and I didn't think anything of it. So then moving out to the Midwest, I was like, oh, wow, this is different. But yes, I think it's a good thing to see it as an opportunity to defend your faith, as you say, and evangelize.
Sure.
Without question. I'm glad I've lived in both worlds. I've never really lived anywhere where being Catholic is a true, like Alabama. I've never lived anywhere like that. But I've always lived in places where there's a Catholic presence. But I think it is interesting, the different kind of dynamics, demographics,
Sure.
and what that can mean.
Yep. So, what's next for you, Daniel? What are some upcoming projects or things that you're excited about doing next?
It's funny, people ask, are you going to do a follow-up? And I always joke that the dream would be 52 abroad, but someone would have to pay for that. I couldn't ask my wife to make that sacrifice again. Probably more immediately, I've gotten involved with a project here in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, where I live. It's called the Serenelli Project. And at its foundation, it's a monastery they've created for people who have left prison, who want to come and live a holy life. And the founder of it is the chaplain for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, the chaplain for the prison system. And he has some really ambitious plans for prison ministry and how to revamp it and how to make it work better at the state levels. And at the heart of it is this monastery to give the formerly incarcerated an opportunity to live a life of holiness. And I think I would love to tell that story in some way as it grows and develops. I volunteer with them, but I would also like to tell the story because I just think it's a fascinating effort, and I'm praying for its success because he's a young guy and he's just really committed to this effort, and I think it's truly worthwhile and something that I'm glad to be a part of, but I would also love to share it with a wider audience.
That sounds wonderful. And it's probably a topic that hasn't been written about a whole lot.
Yeah, I don't know, not that I'm aware of, and he has just, I mean, he has a really ambitious plan on a lot of different fronts that I hope all comes to fruition because it's a worthwhile effort. And I joined him at the prison nearby our house, and it was a great experience as well. It was the first time I had done that. And it was a subject I wrote about in the book, but I didn't get to go into the prison because of a timing thing. So it was kind of like the one unfinished business I had was to actually participate in prison ministry, and it's something I want to do more of.
Sure. Well, until you write that next book,
Yeah.
how can people get this book?
Okay, so probably the easiest way is to go to 52masses.com, which is the website, and there's a link to a Square site. So you can just go directly to the Square site from my website, and then you purchase a copy there, and it comes directly to me, and then I can send it out to people, a signed copy if they so choose. And
Oh,
that's
nice.
the best way. It's on Amazon, but I always encourage the this method. It's coming directly from me. And like I said, if you don't want a signed copy, that won't you can't get that through Amazon because I don't touch those copies. But yeah, so 52masses.com is where the book is available.
And if they want to reach out to you,
Oh, yeah, they're more than welcome. The email address is 52masses@gmail.com. Happy to talk to anybody about anything. I mean, if there's a student or something that has any questions, whether it comes to writing, happy to help. So the only thing I've ever really done as an adult. I have a lot of experience in the field.
yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Well, I have three quick questions for you before we
Okay.
close. So,
All right.
first one is, who is your favorite saint and why?
Well, I can't go into the why because it's personal involving someone that's beyond me. Besides me, there's a personal aspect, so I wouldn't want to share that. But it's Saint Mark Ji Shangzhang. It was actually through the prison ministry that I was introduced to him, and as soon as I heard his story, I knew that's who I'd been looking for. My saint was Saint Mark Ji Shangzhang, and so that's him.
Okay, so I can't let you off the hook yet. Tell us a
Okay.
little bit about this saint because I'm not familiar with them.
Okay, so he lived in China, had a heroin addiction. I believe it was heroin, maybe opium, and went to confess, but couldn't kick his habit. And so eventually the priest told him that he could no longer receive communion or go to confession because he wasn't willing to change. He wanted to, but he wasn't able to. But it never deterred him. He continued to live out a faithful life all the way through his death. And it resonated with me for reasons beyond that, outside of me, but were meaningful.
Thank you. And what's your top takeaway that you hope readers take away from your book, 52 Masses?
So I firmly believe that our church is the greatest force for good in the world. That every day there are millions of Catholic men and women, both in consecrated life and outside it, who are answering God's call to serve in one way or another, in whatever way they've been asked to. They're doing wonderful things for our faith itself, for the people who are in it, but also for their communities, for the world and beyond. And I mean, even with the sex abuse scandal, which was horrific and should never happen again, even through that remained true about our church. And I want people to remember that and be proud of that because it's true. And I guess the other thing on a personal level is be a disciple. Go out and answer God's call with yes, whatever it is that God is asking of you, and be the type of Catholic that builds other Catholics.
I love that. And if you could give one piece of advice to Catholic students who are entering a new parish environment, what would it be?
Don't be afraid. Get involved right from the start. I mean, even if you haven't even formally joined this parish, the best way to find out if the parish is for you is to go to a meeting of St. Vincent Paul or a young adults group or some other organization, or go to mass. And just the best way of finding out which parish is yours is by not passively expecting it to materialize in front of you. Be active in your faith.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and past conversations we've had has been
Yeah.
really great. So I appreciate your being a guest today on the Catholics on Campus podcast. So I just want to say in closing that if you are listening to the podcast, I hope that you'll subscribe and listen regularly. I have booked a whole bunch of really fun and interesting guests for 2026, and I don't want you to miss a single episode. So please tell your friends about the podcast. And I really appreciate your support as we build a strong community of Catholics on campus. So have a great week, everyone.
Thank
God
you
bless you.
and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, Daniel.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.